In 1979, a filmmaker by the name of Hayao Miyazaki was tasked with directing his first film, and it was based on a beloved anime series and adult manga, Lupin III. While Lupin's first film, The Mystery of Mamo, contained a sexually charged Lupin and more upfront adult concepts faithful to the source material, Miyazaki decided for his film to go in an almost completely different direction. A Lupin he and other animators have been crafting as the anime aired. This film shows a more gentle Lupin, still a sucker for Fujiko Mine and a thief, yet with a kind demeanor who is willing to risk everything to save a princess in need. Today, The Castle of Cagliostro is one of the most iconic anime films of all time and helped jumpstart the career of Miyazaki to then pursue making the films many love today. Years later, a small aspiring director would witness Cagliostro and the works of Miyazaki's peers, to then himself be given a chance to direct his first film on an altogether different, but still extremely beloved series. Of course, I'm talking about One Piece. The film in question was the reason I personally began to read one of the best adventure manga ever written. A film that, even if you aren't a One Piece fan, can watch and understand what it is that makes these characters so endearing and their bonds so remarkable. A film that decides to challenge the very core of One Piece's narrative and the glue that holds these colorful characters together. A film that is not afraid to deviate somewhere darker than Oda chooses to go. To tell a story of loss, a story of suffering, and the family we have left. So sit down and grab a drink. My name is Mugen, and this is One Piece and the Meaning of Nakama. Baron Omatsuri and the Secret Island is the sixth One Piece film that follows its own original story and is directed by a man that I believe is one of the greatest working directors in Japan, Mamoru Hosoda. But we'll get to him later. First, let's talk about how well this film adapts the essence of Oda's magnum opus, and to do that, we need to look at the beginning. The movie starts with a cold open on the night of a great storm. A series of lines appear on the screen, and as they end, we sink into the ocean. The sound of the great storm builds, and we cut to Luffy sitting on his favorite spot on the Going Merry. Robin and Usopp are reading a letter found in a bottle with a log pose leading to the island on a map also contained in the message. The Straw Hats discuss whether or not they should go, only for Luffy to make his decision upon hearing the same sentence we saw at the beginning, declaring that if you are a pirate among pirates, venture to Omatsuri Island. This is a very standard setup to the plot of the film, but all the details of the scene I left out are important for you to understand not just the premise, but who our characters are. See, if this is the first time seeing the Straw Hats, you can slowly begin to understand what kind of personality each member has and brings to the crew just by observing them. To start, Robin is curious about Omatsuri Island, and naturally, as she is an archaeologist. Uncovering mysteries of the world is her specialty, and this is an island she says she has never heard of, despite years on the Grand Line. Usopp is extremely cautious about the nature of who sent this, feeling it could be a trap and that going is a bad idea, with his finger still stuck in the bottle. This perfectly distills Usopp's scared and clumsy attitude of being a pirate at this point in the story. Next to them is Zoro, who is doing reps with his dumbbells, trying to get stronger and stronger as his goal is to be the greatest swordsman in the world. Robin continues reading the letter, and here is where we learn about the island and the rest of the crew. The letter reads, "You will also enjoy our many spas and beauty salons. Your nightlife will be filled with beauties from around the world and a selection of fine beverages. Dinner will be a full course of exquisite cuisine." Now, if you know the Straw Hat crew, you can guess maybe what sentences appeals to each of the remaining members. When spas and beauty salons are mentioned, we cut to Nami. Beauties, we cut to Sanji. Finally, exquisite cuisine, we cut to Chopper. These small cuts are everything you need to understand what our characters like and are interested in for leisure. But what's more important is the backgrounds behind them. Even though you see them for 1 second, the film is already distilling this character's interest and specialty into a single shot. Nami is surrounded by maps. The navigator. Sanji, pans, ladles, and spatulas. He's the cook. And Chopper, books upon books, one of them labeled medicinal. He's either into something weird or he's just the doctor. With all Straw Hats on deck repeating their enthusiasm and disdain to visit the island, Zoro asks Luffy if they are going. So, to introduce the main character and captain to the audience, who wishes to become king of the pirates and yearns for adventure, Luffy gives his order. The entire premise of the movie, its characters and their traits are presented in a clean 2-minute intro that is both funny and interesting. These details evoke to a fan of the manga the things you already know about them, which feels consistent. While for a newcomer, it's a quick way to establish the personalities of our crew without using too much exposition or introducing a random character to just meet them. The film, in its first action sequence, does the exact same thing, but more for how the Straw Hats handle humor and conflict. Or how they don't. Upon meeting the Baron Umatsuri, he challenges the crew to an ordeal of hell, goldfish catching. The scene expresses the dynamic powers each member of the Straw Hats possess, but of course it also showcases the ones that don't. You can tell the humor of Oda's manga is present in how each character reacts to keeping this giant fish in the air. Zoro yelling back at the guy whose fish is his pet, Luffy freaking out that he broke the net, Sanji falling into the ocean after saving Nami, and no one cares, man! Like the first scene, Hosoda perfectly introduces the Straw Hats' abilities and idiosyncratic personalities to the audience and the antagonists, giving us info dumps, both for fans and new viewers. The film isn't afforded the time to introduce the origin story of every character or the power system of the world, so the next best thing is to show us their character because of those backstories. If you've seen any of Hosoda's later films, you can find there is a certain aspect about how he goes about making an animated film with the techniques of live action filmmaking. Ongoing wide shots with the camera stationary and dialogue scenes that use the rule of thirds to frame our subjects and the environment they're in. An entire dialogue or joke section can just have one character at the beginning and then have more characters enter and exit frame. Hosoda also likes to use environments to set the mood between his scenes, almost cutting to environments that have no meaning at first, but only revisited with a new context does it make sense to the audience and the story. Like these ravaged ships on the other side of the island? This style was developed from his time at Toei doing anime specials like the Digimon films, so fucking good, and episodes for other series, one of which was One Piece. When adapting stuff like One Piece, many filmmakers will try to just take what's on the page and showcase it, and not really do anything out of the ordinary. But for Hosoda, he's able to use his own style and instead match the essence of Oda's work, even having scenes that feel ripped straight from the GOAT's manga. Look at the scene between Usopp and Nami as she asks how they're going to stop their ship from burning up. It could be segmented into a panel Oda has drawn. The dialogue even uses Oda's own writing style of characters getting enraged at others for not meaning what they say. Or you'll have a character speak in a way that is just very specific to them, something that Oda does with his own characters. Hosoda's own long shots can draw comedic action when in the moment. In this scene here, Zoro's on a boat with Sanji driving through the canals and he has to dodge these incoming bullets. So instead of just cutting back and forth, Hosoda decides to keep the camera still as Zoro dodges in such a comedic way that adds to the animation. And it continues as he jumps off the boat onto other boats and jumps so high in the air, waiting to eventually land. Mix in some well-produced 3D CGI amongst fluid, well-drawn 2D characters, and you have a One Piece film animated in such a kinetic way, you wouldn't have guessed this is actually a franchise film. Hosoda does a good job of managing the essence of One Piece, but also the temptation of adding to lore in his film. You'll find information about characters in the world of One Piece being mentioned and surmised to make sure it is the plot of the film taking center stage, as opposed to trying to explain everything about the specifics. For example, if you have read or watched One Piece, you might ask, how did they get to Omatsuri Island when they're on the Grand Line? If you don't know, crews on the search for the One Piece use special compasses called a log post to help navigate to the next island due to them having unique magnetic properties, and you can never know which island's next, unless you have an eternal pose, a compass that points to that specific magnetic signature regardless of where you are. In the opening scene, that is exactly what was in the bottle along with the map. It's shown in a single shot for 2 seconds. Hosoda is not trying to help build more lore specific to the film that also accompanies the source material, but rather try to set the plot in motion while using that lore and answering any questions of exposition with relative ease to fans who might ask them. Otherwise, the non-fans, like me when I first watched this, was none the wiser. All I thought was, oh man, that's a cool compass. Suffice to say, Hosoda has a knack for guising his exposition and directing the audience's attention to the important stuff when needed. The only time Roger is mentioned is once near the third act of the film, and its purpose is actually to reveal the backstory of another character. And that's important because those backstories, like many in One Piece, are the backbone of an island's tale, which is the formula Oda uses in his stories to this day. It isn't one-to-one every time, but the concept involves the Straw Hats venturing to an island and meeting a series of characters who need help from those who rule the island and have our heroes defeat them, with some small changes here and there. Now, as you watch this film and meet other characters who are not the Baron's accomplices, you can start to see that this is the case. It's not any different. But Hosoda kinda does play a twist on it. Because as Chopper and Robin notice, the island is beautiful, it's luxurious, it's almost too perfect. There is no one else here, and there's something not right about what's happening. There's something not right about that flower. While the Straw Hats engage in fun and comedic action scenes, we are learning more about the reality of the Baron's Island. The crew believe it is a resort, and the audience believes this is another standard, hopeful, One Piece adventure. But it's not the case. You realize this as the characters are slowly being separated from each other, either intentionally or not. While the first task of putting a giant fish into a bucket was fun and joyous, our heroes only succeeded because they were able to work together to do so. If a single one of them hadn't been there, then they may not have been able to win the challenge. So when the Baron moves on to the next task, he places the 3 devil fruit users in the spa area, and the rest take on the ordeal in pairs, dividing them away from each other, even sabotaging what they think is happening and playing on their insecurities. In the ring toss event, Usopp's package pulls him into the air against his will, and as he leaves, the Baron's elderly crewmates comment how Nami has been abandoned by one of her own, something she believes, even slapping Usopp twice when he returns. The thing that's important about the plot separating our characters physically and mentally is because of Oda's core in his story. The goal is to find One Piece, and the adventure along the way are the delights for the audience, but without these cast of characters, it's no longer One Piece. While many aspects of the manga deal with the characters working together or on their own to overcome their personal issues, they would ultimately not make it without each other. Every character at some point in the narrative is needed, and if they were not there, the outcome would be completely different. So what happens when a villain can systematically separate them without any of them realizing? Robin later learns that the lily on the Baron's shoulder is no normal talking flower, but something called the Lily Carnation, an entity that lives symbiotically with the Baron. As Usopp's instincts implied, the bottle is a lure for powerful pirates to come to the island only for him to use their essence and life for his lily. The flower, evolving into a monstrous carnivorous plant in the final act, resembles the tactics of a real one. Darlingtonia californica is also known as the cobra lily, and it's a carnivorous plant that sprouts new roots connected to it as it grows and can confuse its prey by hiding its own entrance, something that the island of Omatsuri itself does. The island not only spawns its inhabitants, hence the sprouts on the heads of all the locals, but also the environment you see. After the first ordeal, the Straw Hats are unable to get out back to the beach where they entered, only to walk back onto a stage where the Baron was waiting for them. An entity that can produce more flora and hide its own entrance and move characters towards specific destinations. Very similar to a real carnivorous plant. By the end of the film, we see that it's not just flora. The buildings, the canals, the resorts, and architecture were produced by this very flower that sat on top of the Baron's shoulder. Instead of a carnivorous plant luring with pollen, it lures with visuals, with spas, beauties, and cuisine. Everything a pirate who has been long at sea of the Grand Line could want. And it's this oasis that the Baron has created for himself and his crew. But why? One of the things I admire about Hosoda's work is his ability to portray trauma in film, especially characters who are lost, either literally or emotionally. They either do not know where they belong or unsure how they can belong anywhere else. When Nami hears Muchiguro's story of the night he and the Baron's crew witnessed a storm that shipwrecked them, Hosoda only shows the ocean of that tempest. No flashback scenes, just the characters speaking about that night. The rain, the wind, and the storm, leaving the re-experienced trauma of that night to impact Muchiguro and set the tone for the film's darkest act. One Piece is a multifaceted tale with hopeful highs and sorrowful lows. It makes for compelling storytelling. So when you read about the Grand Line and the horrors that can await characters or even experience the trauma of a character's backstory, it's extremely impactful. The Grand Line is an ocean that has claimed the lives of foolish pirates who attempt to conquer its seas. And while there are many who have survived, countless can barely continue and retreat back to the safety of the Blue Sea regions. The rest never make it back. It is in that backdrop that Hosoda presents the horror of this film, through the trauma of the Baron's crew. The reason this island is here and our characters now trapped stems from the grief experienced in that storm and how hopeless the crew felt when they had each other to count on, but it wasn't enough to save them. The Baron's loss of crew that night and the loneliness he experienced from it helps separate him from most One Piece villains, both canon and not. It's not so much his tragic backstory, but more so his goals because of it. His goals are not grand scope adventure villain goals, but more personal and just as devastating. By sacrificing pirates to Lily, the Baron gains power, but not power most One Piece villains wish to attain. It's not power to rule the Grand Line. It's not power to exact revenge on other pirates out of jealousy. It's not power to destroy the world government or become king of the pirates. It's the power to bring back his crew. The storm Muchiguro has been talking about killed him and all his crewmates, except the Baron. This works as a strong antithesis to Luffy and actually helps curve a problem One Piece narratives can face when they have to craft original films. Like most stories in all of media, our heroes need to grow and change. But for an extremely long tale like One Piece, those changes must happen at very specific moments very far in the story's progress as it intertwines with others. To change Luffy's thoughts and feelings about being king of the pirates, especially really early on, would be blasphemy as it changes who he is as a character fundamentally, and to do it in a film would be unheard of. The same goes for every other Straw Hat. They each have a goal and they need to believe in that dream. So when filmmakers create new One Piece films that have conflict, they usually need to be something that challenges Luffy's fundamental ideals. Like in the manga, the growth comes from sticking to one's dream and inspiring side characters to change themselves. Or they play Davy Backfight, which, sure. In the manga, villains usually threaten to kill newly made friends or crewmates, their reasons being ego, or their goal is pretty much the same as Luffy's. So many One Piece films involve something similar to the manga. Have characters get kidnapped, the world be conquered, an island threatened, or Luffy's dream to become king of the pirates is in danger. And it's because of all that the Baron himself stands out, and what makes this film feel much darker than any other. The Baron manages to kidnap every Straw Hat but Luffy, and feeds them all to Lily Carnation, resurrecting his decaying crew once again, and stay here where he can be with them forever. Perhaps something Luffy would do himself if he was alone in the world once again. The shock of seeing his crew be eaten body and soul fundamentally breaks Luffy as he is unable to save them. This film was able to achieve a feeling of total loss that our captain did not experience in the manga until 5 years later. The Baron remarks that Luffy is now all alone on the giant sea that is the Grand Line, just like he was. No crew, no friends, and no Nakama. Nakama is a term constantly brought up in the film. In Japanese, it can mean friend, comrade, or crewmate. Any friend context name. When characters say it in One Piece, they talk about people that they have intertwined their very being with, their very destiny. They are a family you could not find elsewhere. People whose ties mean more than crewmates and deeper than just a friend. People you would give your life for as they would give theirs for you. That is the bond between Nakama, the bond of One Piece's characters. If you've just watched this film, you don't know the circumstances that led to all these different people meeting, but if you did, you can understand this bond as each have laid bare their hopes and dreams to each other, that now they must achieve them together. The fact that you can feel this unspoken bond is due to the writing, but also Hosoda's approach to storytelling. It is something he masters in his later work, creating these unseen bonds between characters and how there is a place for every character to exist if they reach out for it. So when Luffy believes his Nakama are gone, Hosoda portrays this despair of losing his place in the world with true authenticity. Luffy, although very aloof to the conflict that is tearing apart his crew throughout the film, is deeply empathetic to them all. To have them as a crew, he feels an even greater debt. He is the captain, but he relies on them more than they realize. In the manga, Luffy even says that he isn't very good at a lot of things, so he really does need everyone else to help him achieve his dreams. When the potential to lose his crew in any story of the manga takes place, it also threatens who he is as a person. He can't become the king of the pirates alone, but he wouldn't become the king of the pirates if it meant saving his friends. Without his Nakama, who does he have left? The Baron lost his. He lost the very crew that made him whole. Even if he never made it to the end of the Grand Line, he would still be grateful every day he spent with them. Yet he could not let his grief go. The Baron perfectly reflects who Luffy could have been if he could not move on from his crew and began to fester in all that hatred and despair. The film explores what it is like to lose something so dear to you, but also not appreciate that it is already there. The Baron, after the first ordeal, is infuriated by the Straw Hat celebration, not just because they defeated his challenge, but because he sees a crew so intertwined with each other that he wishes to have that back forever. The way in which he keeps his crew alive is another aspect of trying to recover lost loved ones. They age and decay. Their minds become more clouded and tormented by their deaths as they slowly remember them or question how they can't die. It's tragic, partly because the Baron feels genuine when he speaks to his crew. He wants to ease their worries and wash away their trauma. Like many of the tragedies we face in our lives, and even the horrors of our characters' past, they can't be forgotten, but we must live with them and continue onward, something the Baron cannot do. His very power of using arrows to pin those down and subdue them is the antithesis to Luffy's power and carefree mind. He bounces back every time because he's rubber. He cannot be contained and will return with force. So when the Baron subdues them, he pins Luffy with arrows, disabling the very power he needs to be who he is. But he does bounce back, eventually, and believes in the new kind of people he has just met. It's because of this that Luffy succeeds. He finds the Tea Pirates and Brief of the Mustache Pirates to be his strength when they say he can still save his Nakama, only for them to become Luffy's Nakama in kind. The Baron would never find a new crew, and that's why he loses. This film is haunting in how it places our hopeful, spirited characters in a world almost full of animosity and uncertainty, beginning like a One Piece story with music and color, and at points becoming so dark there is no music, there is no sound effects, there is no joy, just silence. It shows the darkest fall of Luffy's mind when he believes he has lost his crew that he cares for so deeply. but it is precisely how dark it must be for us to believe that it is possible everything may be lost. One Piece is a story about the journey and persisting in spite of the insurmountable odds to achieve one's dream, no matter how impossible. So when the Baron falls, he hears his crew. They tell him that he should have moved on, found a new crew even if it was hard to do so. That's what they would have wanted for him. It's why the crew member who weakens the Baron isn't Luffy. It's the father of a crew who feels believed in and believes in a rubber man they just met. When Lupin III, the Castle of Cagliostro was released, it was able to inspire a new generation of Lupins and a generation of animators, Hosoda being one of them, deciding to tell his first feature film through the lens of One Piece and tell it in a way that had not been done before, with framing unlike One Piece, character designs less like the anime it is based off, and with a tone much darker than had been done in its own manga. Like Lupin, Hosoda had made a One Piece story more like its source material by doing something completely the opposite of it. The idea of finding a new crew has some thematic resonance with One Piece as a franchise, at least with how I see it. I found after reading the manga and still slowly catching up that I'm interested in seeing a lot of the iconic scenes I have experienced again in another medium. Yet when I do see them online, I feel underwhelmed by the animation. They don't bring anything new that wasn't already there on the page. It feels just like any other show. But as I reached past the time skip of the manga, I was recommended to watch a single episode. One Piece Fan Letter. I was blown away by an art style that has been becoming more and more prominent in people's perception of One Piece. Directed by Megumi Ishitani, I felt as though someone had done what Hosoda did when he made Baron Omatsuri, casting off the shackles of what the series meant to look like or be, but instead utilize an art style that makes Luffy much more like rubber, encapsulating the color, humor, tragedy, and spirit of Oda's world. Finding a new crew of Straw Hats and how to show them in a cinematic way most forget you can do. One Piece is a world that feels boundless, yet so many ways in which it is interpreted to animation over the decades has been singular and bounded, never to take risks in its own adaptations to save for the few films we have. This video isn't to say that the only right way to adapt or write for One Piece is to make it really dark and terrifying, or that Hosoda is the only one who is able to capture what One Piece is truly about. That's an argument I couldn't make, and I don't want to. But like Miyazaki for Cagliostro, Hosoda created an animated banger that isn't without flaws, but it is a perfect introduction to a group of flawed, emotional pirates that only feel at home when they are all together on one ship. While I knew before I even read a single chapter of One Piece that this film couldn't do something so audacious as to kill off any of their characters and be anything more than an accessory to a canon in another medium, I felt terror when Luffy saw them go. I felt despair for characters I knew nothing about, characters whose origin and adventures I hadn't yet read, but I felt like I knew them regardless. I welled up in tears when Luffy managed to save the life of a mustache man named Brief, who he had just met and felt like a throwaway character just for the film, but like in Oda's own chapters, became a character I would find wanting to live despite losing his mustached crew years ago. Laughing when he tries to invite Luffy into his Nakama with a gesture of mustache, using your finger as a fake one, was just funny and dumb. But then the scene that made me cry is this one.
Nakama?
Baron Omatsuri is not a One Piece film above the others because of who made it or how they did it. Even if I sound biased for Hosoda's films, which I am clearly, but because of how impossible it feels that it exists, like the very tale it adapts. It is one perfect entry to the rest of what One Piece is, however you wish to experience it. The anime, the specials, the games, the movies, and of course for me, the manga. From a ship of pirates bickering about where to go, to a giant goldfish ordeal, an amazing boat chase through the city canals, a hellish confrontation amongst a blood moon of lost loved ones, to end with their captain who can't stop laughing even as he lies battered and bruised. Their journey keeps going on. And because of this film, I'm still reading. Thanks so much for watching and making it to the end of the video. Let me know what you think about the film Omatsuri or what you love about One Piece in the comments. I've actually been hoping to make a video about my experience reading One Piece for the first time, so let me know if that's something you'd like to see. Below in the description is a Discord you can join, but also a Patreon where you can support videos like these for a single Australian dollar. That being said, I want to say a massive thank you to all of my patrons. Thanks to Lenoriel, Andrew Goss, Robin, Deus Vault, MF Soups, Corey, Mr. Lamb, Skippy, William Maguire, Jay the Rebel, Shingoku Satsu, Mark Tuovinen, JK Sensei, Zeke JT, and Anders Persson. Thanks again, guys. If you enjoyed the video, feel free to give it a like and subscribe so it lets YouTube know you like my videos, or by watching another one of these ones here. If you want to see another video actually I made about Hosoda's film The Boy and the Beast, be sure to check it out. Thanks again, guys. But that's all from me. My name is Mugen. As always, have a good one.